dominate our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world-class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station.
So hello everybody, very pleasant good evening to all and very, very warm welcome to you in Radioland and in internet world at home and abroad. Thank you so much for choosing Q95 tonight. This is the Global View on Q. A very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 9th May 2023, the 19th Tuesday of 2023, and it's 8 p.m. on the button at Q95, the big station. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. Please follow us at Q95 FM Radio. Check our website at www.q95da.com. Share the live, like our pages, get the latest breaking news and reviews as it happens, when it happens, only on Q95, the big station. So tonight we're continuing to revive the spirit of graciousness, of love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. I would probably ask Mr. Louis Robinson to mute his mic for a second until he's ready to speak so we don't get any feedback coming from his location, and also Gabe as well. So Dominicans are right now struggling with insufficient jobs, a high cost of living, inflation and increasing crimes, a high debt to GDP ratio, a climbing national debt, and waiting to see whether the 2023-24 national budget will provide some proactive measures to stop these sluggish economic trends that will cause further loss of jobs and further impoverish ordinary unsuspecting Dominicans. So meantime, Dominica is besieged with no-bid national projects that are contracted out to foreigners and foreign workers at the expense of Dominicans and the Dominican economy. So why are Dominicans not speaking out on their situations as compared to that of our sister islands in the Caribbean? My distinguished guest tonight, Attorney Gabriel Christian, and the finance expert Louis Robinson. We might be joined later by businessman Andy Jolly. And I hope they will provide us and help us craft a way forward for Dominica's society. We are exercising human rights, constitutional, legal, and civil rights and responsibilities becomes the order of the day in this democracy. So good governance, as we know, will always be required to create and implement any great progressive, competitive public strategies and policies for the advancement of wealth and prosperity for its people, and which might hopefully take Dominica out of the social and economic morass of widespread poverty, dependency, and mendicancy, and lead to the creation of investments and jobs and incomes and wealth, foreign earnings, and real growth and real GDP growth for all Dominicans. Such a strategy will hopefully avoid the pitfall of just blindly walking the treacherous path towards a cryptocurrency precipice as the democracy and freedom continues to be eroded. Dominicans are the only ones, in fact, who can save themselves. Only Dominicans can do that. And every Dominican should heed the writing on the wall and the signs of the destruction of their nation wherever it exists, and ask themselves, is it time to stand and demand what is rightfully theirs? So meantime, the Global View on Q is continuing to prepare to embrace Dominica's 45th anniversary of independence this November 2023, and we certainly look forward to free and fair elections to preserve our democracy. Wherever you are in Dominica, in the region and globally, please tell your friends and associates to tune in, call in, and join the conversation. Get the answers to your questions, be a part of the solution. And as usual, a huge shout out, hugs, much love and appreciation. A big thank you to our healthcare providers, frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, and other public and private sector persons out there. We welcome every Dominican and friend of Dominica. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air as usual. Thank you, Lambi, on the console at Q95, directing the traffic. We will take your calls a little later on your numbers, and you can call are all posted on the homepage of the Q95 website at www.q95da.com. But Lambi will also give you the numbers later on. The people's voice is a priority tonight, so please call us. But now let's get started, and I want to go over to Attorney Gabriel Christian to get the ball rolling tonight on the best way forward to get the people out of the dilemma, what appears to be a never ending cycle of poverty, and in some cases, mendicancy that, that we are witnessing. The fact of the matter is, Gabe, as I go over to you, really and truly, we have seen a dearth of people exercising, they're feeling they're free to exercise their constitutional rights, their human rights, their civil liberties. For some reason, they're afraid to do that. I'm not sure why. But certainly, I think it is about time. We are coming to our 45th anniversary of independence this year, November 3rd. And I think Dominicans should wake up and start really realizing that it is their right and that they need to exercise it. The right to assemble, the right to free speech, and so on. So, Gabe, let me just go over to you. Let's get the ball rolling. You might want to unmute your mic so that so we can hear.
Pleasant. Thank you very much,
All right, Gabe.
Brother Sheridan. Pleasant good evening to you. Pleasant good evening to Brother Louis Robinson. Pleasant good evening to our people at home and abroad. Sheridan, at the end of the day, we have to take cognizance of the fact that we get the governments that we deserve. Let me repeat what I said. Dominicans, listen to me carefully. I'm not here to sell party. I'm not here to sell myself or promote Q95. I'm here to talk about the quality of life on our island and the democracy that we once had when we were an associated state of Britain before independence that we have lost. Dominica today is a more dictatorial, tyrannical, despotic, and unfair society than in that period after 1967, when we had internal self-government with a premier by the name of Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Let me explain what it is I am saying. In that period, we had a civil service association. That association advocated, whether you agreed with them or not, zealously for the rights of the civil servants who they claimed to represent. Many times, they were seen as being too pro-freedom, which was the Freedom Party led by Dame Eugenia Charles. But in a democracy, people in unions, in the civil service, in the non-governmental sector are free to have the views. And those views are protected by a bodyguard of institutions. So the civil service was such an institution. In that same period, you also had something called the Employers Federation. The Dominica Employers Federation was organized as a non-governmental entity to protect the business class. So if they had issues with income taxes, with tariffs, with custom duties and the like, with the absence in their view of an enabling environment for private enterprise, they would then gather in a body corporate and petition on behalf of their members. Similarly, the folks who were stevedores on the waterfront and Allied Workers Union, WAU, led by the well-known trade unionist Louis Benoit, aka or also known as Zabuka. They advocated zealously for the rights of stevedores, and at one point in time in the 1980s, they accumulated sufficient funds that they actually built their own housing estate in the Roseau Valley called Louisville. Am I correct, Sheridan Gregoire? Am I still on point?
You're very much on point.
Okay. There was also another trade union, the Dominica Amalgamated Workers Union, DAWU, led by another trade unionist by the name of Anthony Joseph. And
I guess you're searching for some documents.
Well, I just want to make sure because I wasn't sure that I was able to be heard. And Anthony Joseph, sorry about that, vigorously advocated for those members of his union. There was another union that was much smaller It came in towards the end of the 1970s, the National Workers Union, led by a gentleman called GEMUP. Then on the student side, you had the United Student Council, led by a guy called Samuel J. Christian, later Dr. Sam, in the 1970s. Then we had the Federation of Students with people like Debbie Douglas, Agnes Esprit, Juan Gabriel Christian, Irvin Andre, and others advocating for students. Do we have a student union in Dominica today?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. So today you have students who are disconnected while at school from the issues of governance in the society, when we know in societies in general, students generally are at the cutting edge of social transformation. It is when you are young and energetic and in search of knowledge and full of that vibration of youth that one is most capable. And young people are the ones who make social transformation happen. It happened in the South. It's Martin Luther King and the Students Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, led by John Lewis and Andrew Young and those persons like Stokely Carmichael. It happened in South Africa in the movement against apartheid, where young people in the Soweto rose up and said they were not going to tolerate apartheid anymore. So if in Dominica, our students are so beguiled, so misled, so distracted, to be given trinkets and to be given circuses by high-priced entertainers singing filthy music, and they're not organized to defend their interest. And what are those interests? Well, if I'm a student leader, I want to make sure that we have a dynamic economy, so that if I've done 5 years of grammar school, 5 years of the St. Mary's Academy, 5 years at the Portsmouth Secondary School, 5 years at St. Andrews High School or the Pierre Charles High School in Grand Bay, and I get out and I go to the State College and I do another 2 years and I get an associate's degree in electrical engineering or in civil engineering or in automobile repair, that I have an economy that I can then insert myself into with my skills and be employed in a gainful fashion, as opposed to having to join a gang and acquire some illicit weapons and sell drugs, or to cross over to Martinique or Guadeloupe and engage myself in criminal conduct to the disservice of our reputation as a nation. So students standing up for a just governance of their society are doing that which is meaningful. It is not partisan. It's not about who you support. It's simply saying that you constitute a base of power in the society outside government. Today, Dominica is a one-party state. Why do I say that? Well, it's a one-party state because the Prime Minister has said, I run things. He did not say the Parliament runs things. He did not say that the judiciary has a role. He did not say that the police has a role. He said, I run things here. And when he said that, he also said that no law, no constitution. And we know that we are a nation, democracies are nations of laws, not of men. And that no man, no matter how big and boisterous, no matter how loudmouth, no matter whether he lives in a mansion on a hill, has the right to arrogate unto himself the entire state, to the degree that now, today in 2023, we have a $1 billion project, the biggest infrastructural project in the history of our state. And it's given to a company run by a mystery man from the Middle East. That today, in 2023, 40 plus years after independence, we have the biggest project being done without public tender. Lambie's on the phone. Brother Louis is here, the financial expert, and you, Sheridan, you were a significant player in the commerce of our country. Where have you ever heard a major public project in any democracy being given over to a friend of the Prime Minister? The same company that supposedly built the mansion that he's supposedly renting, that is not his own. Where have you ever heard this?
Well, let me tell you, let me just say, Gable.
Yeah.
When I was the president of the DEIC, and I was also on the executive of the Employees Federation, you would not have heard that happening without hearing from the Chamber of Commerce. You would have heard from the local private sector. As a matter of fact, when I was there and we got a sense that the government, Eugenia was the prime minister at the time, that the government was kind of running away with policy that was not in the interest of the private sector. We went to Eugenia, we had discussion, and we got to establish a policy committee. We were not looking to make policy. We just wanted to review the policies of the government. And then at first, there was some resistance, but later on she agreed, and we agreed to have like quarterly meetings with the cabinet to discuss the policies of the government, ensure that it was favorable to growth and development of the local private sector. I just wanted to say that just to show today, we're hearing absolutely nothing from private sector organizations.
Brother Sheridan, you make an excellent point. One of the attributes of a democracy is a civil society where there are organizations of varying stripes. So you have the Employers Federation, you have the Student Federation, you have the trade unions, you have the church council, you have the cooperative sector. And what you do with those organizations, as you so well illustrated in your reference to Eugenia Charles and the Employers Federation petition in her, is you can have then a sort of dialogue based on your advocacy. The civil society organization provides the citizenry with alternate bases of power to bridle the excesses of government. When government is so big and dominated by one man and snuffs out all the enabling structures that make up a democracy, the democracy is lost. So you do not have any independent trade union worthy of the name in Dominica right now. You do not have any independent student federation existing in Dominica right now. We have a director of public prosecution, where the office of the public prosecution is under the thumb of the oligarchy. What is the oligarchy? An oligarchy in a country is an elite of people who govern for their interests, by their interest, and in their interest, and not in the interest of the people that they are supposed to govern. And the oligarchy in Dominica, in some countries, they own land, other countries, they own industry, as in banks and factories. In Dominica, interestingly enough, the oligarchy is satiated, that is, engorged with the wealth of what? Passport sales. The very national identity sold in mysterious places, unaccounted for the most part, flowing back to the coffers of those who run the system. So it is a friends and family operation. So there's no Labour Party to speak of. Ask an average Labour Party person, what is your constitution? What is your philosophy? When was your party even founded? What are the founding principles of the Labour Party? They can't answer you. And the reason they can't answer you is because it is, again, a country where democracy has been eviscerated and dominated by one man. So I'll stop here right now with this call. And that is a call to every Dominican that we can only restore our democracy where you, every boy and girl, every man and woman, every police officer, every civil servant, every trade unionist, every church worker, every farmer, every fisher folk person organizes themselves into structures that are accountable to the members, pay your dues, show up, write articles, educate yourself about your constitution and what your rights are, and educate yourself and the community at large about the requirements of democracy, which requires an independent parliamentary sector, that is the legislative branch, an independent judicial sector that will govern the adjudication of disputes in society, and an executive that is responsive to the population. And fourthly, and most importantly, an institutional basis of many different civil society organizations that will stand together to ensure that government is held accountable to the rule of law.
Yes, Gable, thanks for the introductory remarks there. Louis, I'm coming to you now. I hope you'll turn on your mic so that we will be able to hear you. But you've heard some of the remarks made by Gabe, right?
Yes, I did.
Right, and he mentioned a number of things, and I know that you are well versed the whole history of what has been happening in the Dominican economy and the politics and so on. So you're going to help us out there too. He did talk about student movements, We know that was a thing that Dominica was very strong. As a matter of fact, I myself, Gabe, when I was at UWI in St. Augustine, I ultimately became the president of the Students Guild, the Students Movement. And the Students Guild at St. Augustine in Trinidad, and same at Mona, and to some extent at Keyville as well in Barbados, they really were prime movers of change in the society. I mean, the students in Trinidad played a significant role in the early 70s in the revolution, a very significant role there. And I'm sure Louis will remember some of that. But not only that,
Indeed, indeed.
not only that, but I mean, Gabe, you know, the cadet corps, the cadets played a significant role in Dominica in terms of the work that was done and the discipline that was there among the people. And then, of course, the point I'm making is that when we hear Louis about projects that are not approved by the authority, the planning authorities, that the law says that if you're going to have a national project, you must put it out to tender, and there's no tender. And the contracts are awarded to foreign firms who are allowed to engage foreign workers to a very, very large extent. And then we're told by the head of state, by the leader of the DLP regime in office, that they've 200 and $214 million has been remitted overseas by those foreign companies and the foreign workers. Can you imagine, Louis? You're a man who has been in the finance business for a while. Can you imagine if you had taken the $214 million, paid that to Dominican contractors and Dominican workers? It remained in the economy in Dominica. And that money was in circulation in the cash registers in the local businesses in Dominica. Can you imagine what kind of difference that would make in the economy? Louis. I don't know whether you're hearing me, Louis, because for some reason you're.
Yes, I'm hearing you, but you're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, well, I thought I was clear, but well, you go right here, jump in then.
I listened to my friend Gabo there, and in addition to what he said, it's interesting to note that our people don't seem to know, as Gabo mentioned, about their constitution, what it is and what it is not. Now, if you ask anybody, which section covers what and all this sort of stuff, oftentimes I talked about a mandamus brief, which is where you take the government or a government entity to court to do what the law requires them to do. And I don't know where this idea of fair got into Dominicans. I remember in the 60s, 70s, when we had the Black Power movement, alliance, whatever you want to call it, we challenged everything. We challenged everything and everyone. There was no fear. We seem to have lost the fearlessness of Bala, of Congaree, of the Kalinago people, of the Maroons. We have lost that kind of fearlessness. We have become so fearful now that basically, we don't even take care of our own interest. When I look and I think of the trade union movements, I belonged at one time to the CSA. Then later on, I became General Secretary of DAO. And now when I sit back and I see we have a former trade union leader as president and a former trade union leader, again from another union, former president, it amazes me that we are at a stage where we don't have any effectively functioning unions. At this time, we have the PSU. They are trying their best. But what happened? The government, the Labour Party government from, I guess, 2003, 2004, every single person that they employed them as a party person not as a person getting a job, a Dominican getting a job in the service. And so these persons did not depend on the collectiveness of the union bargaining for them. They felt that their minister, their pal rep would bargain for them. And so they did not join up the union as they should have. And the vast majority of members in the PSU at the moment, maybe retired or they're out of it, and the persons who are the employees in the public service now, a lot of NEP persons, so they don't have status to be in the union. And then you have others who are not in the union. Yet at the same time, you have persons who have been in the service for years without being confirmed. Where you hear under the prior public service union, government will be giving civil servants contracts. In Dominica, when you work in the public service, that was a lifetime job. Now we have an administration that decides to deprive people of that job security. So for you to have that job security, you must totally depend on a pal rep or somebody to give you a job. The police force, when I knew it, when they had vacancies, they would apply and invite you to apply. You would apply, you would sit a test. If you pass, you were selected, then you would go to training. Now it is the PAL reps who send people to join the police force. And they say, my PAL rep sent me. What is the result? You have what passes for a police force. I often describe it as the military arm of the Labour Party. And so I don't think we understand fully the role of every government has a constitution by which it's supposed to operate. The unions have a constitution. The political parties have a constitution. The philosophy of the Dominica Labour Party was all shall eat. The new philosophy, well, they call it New Labour, is some shall eat all. And these are some of the very disturbing things because of the deception, the decline, and the despair. People have become extremely fearful. They can't speak anymore. I thought that from in the 90s, 95 particularly, when you had fear no more. That was the talk. Now we have become extremely fearful. People will not even speak. Even the public servants, they have their jobs. You are senior civil servants. I mean, people who have constitutional positions, like the director of audit, the financial secretary. These people are governed by particular laws. We have a director of public prosecution. Why should one be fearful? You are a professional. The politicians come and they go. The public service remains.
But Louis, here's the thing. What I was hoping that you could address for us too is that we are a nation of laws, right? And we do have laws, but it's obvious that many of those laws are not being observed. When we talked about this major national project, $1.3 billion project, the single largest project that Dominica has undertaken or is planning to undertake. And to learn that this is being put out there without any bidding, the contract given to our foreign firms to employ a foreign company to do, a lot of foreign employees who work there. How does that make any sense? I mean, we are a nation of laws. See, this is what Gabe was talking about. The fact of the matter, if we are in fact a nation of law, why is it that the Dominican contractors, the Dominican workers who need those jobs, why is it that they're so silent when it is their right to be able to speak and speak out? Now and then you hear one or two equipment operator say something, and then after about a couple of weeks, you don't hear about him anymore. And yet you hear people are talking about bringing in endless equipment that is all, most of it is available in Dominica, but bringing in equipment from outside. Many of that equipment probably are not necessarily new equipment to make a case for that. And yet we are supposed to be a nation of laws and people have their constitutional rights, and yet they're afraid to speak out for themselves. Now, Gabe, this is 2023. Dominica will be 45 years old on the 3rd of November since it got independence. Shouldn't we really be feeling like, yes, you know something, we should be independent thinkers. We should be able to stand on our feet and stand for our rights and demand what is rightfully ours. What are your thoughts, Gabe?
First of all, I want to endorse every single thing my very good brother, wise, strong, brilliant in his own right, Louis Robinson has said. I've known Louis since I was a child, and he's always been a man who stood up for what is best for Dominicans. And Louis, I just want to take this opportunity, if no one has said it before, I want to publicly thank you, sir. Despite the fact that you're now in your golden years, while many people just sit down to play dominoes and loll about, you spend your time doing your utmost with the help of Brother Sheridan, Brother Lambie, and others to educate our people. You see, one of the major things that we have lacking now when we hear how our young people have been so distracted, so lacking in discipline because they feed them at these circuses with all the distraction in the world. Let me just, I'm going to come back to the Public Procurement Act. In fact, I will say to you, Sheridan, and to your listening audience, all of the people now have smartphones. There was an Act number 14 of 2021, Charles A. Sovereign, I think that stands for Angelo, not Angel, Sovereign, 8th December 2021, quote, an act to modernize public procurement in Dominica and to provide for the retention and disposal of public property in accordance with the principles of what? Listen to this carefully, ladies and gentlemen. In accordance with the principles, wait for it, bells, whistles, bombshell, in accordance with the principles of good governance. Are you kidding me? This is Angelo Wins. This is below Sovereign's name, the guy who sits up in the $26 million malice, to establish the Public Procurement Board and the Procurement Review Council, and for related matters, and to repeal the Public Procurement and Contract Administration Act. So they repealed the old act that we knew when we grew up, which allowed for good governance, where you'd see in the Dominica Herald, or in the Dominica Chronicle, or in the Dominica Star. Louis, you know about the Dominica Star. Sheridan, you know about the Dominica Herald. And Brother Lambie, you know about the Dominica Chronicle.
Yep.
And you see it in there along the section for people who are trying to get liquor licenses. The general public is invited, or the general public is advised that tenders are now open for the building of a bridge, the building of a wall, the building of a school. Tenders are invited. Today, people are given contracts in Dominica in violation with that historical affinity for good governance. They've replaced that act in 2021, supposedly to accord with the principles of good governance, to establish a public procurement board and a review council. Was there a review for this airport project? Was there a review by a public procurement board before they signed the contract with the Chinese railroad company? Can anybody give me the minutes? Mr. Severin, President of Dominica, your name is over that December 8th document that's online. It says, Charles A. Severin, I call on you, sir, on this 9th day of May 2023, tell us where it is, and you, Prime Minister, Skerrit, there was a public procurement board review prior to the granting of the contract to MMC to build the airport. I will wait until hell freezes over. Tell us, give us the date and time. Give us the minutes. This is the public's interest. You're running a country like a private fiefdom, like a private business, like you have a little shop selling a gill of rum in the village. This is the country. You have the law that was signed off on by the president. It says there's a public procurement board and a procurement review council. Who are the members of the procurement board, Mr. Prime Minister? Tell us. Who are the members of the Dominica's government public procurement review council? Tell us. When do they meet? How often do they meet? What is the agenda? Or what were the agenda items prior to the grant of these tracts? You see, so we're a nation of laws, but we have a government that's lawless because we know that the laws are not being complied with. And I will conclude by saying this about the miseducation of a nation. Not too long ago, I saw a video of a jazz festival at the Cabrits. Louis Robinson, you're very knowledgeable. Sheridan, Gregoire, so are you, Brother Lambie, and others out there. It was only in my later years that I discovered, through the work of Lennox Honeychurch, whose name I will mention, even if he may not want me to, who was very instrumental in the rehabilitation of the fort, and I thank him for it, and I've written about that fort was the site of a rebellion by the West Indian Regiment. As a result of that rebellion, that mutiny, the British Army abolished slavery for all slave soldiers in the British Empire. So Dominica, therefore, was a trailblazer in the freedom cause. Has any one of you heard of one symposium, one forum, one conference at Fort Shirley to discuss this outstanding historical fact that allowed for Dominica to be a trailblazer in freedom song and liberation struggle because of that mutiny that Lennox Honeychurch wrote about? It's on a sign. Not one forum, not one seminar, not one book, not one pamphlet on the proceedings of a seminar to discuss such a great historical event. But they will use that site, all kinds of carnival and debauchery and whatever. I'm not saying there's no need for a jazz festival, don't get me wrong. It's important to have entertainment. But we have to be a serious nation. We cannot be lopsided. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but all play and no work makes Jack and Jill dumb boys and girls. And we're seeing the dumbing down of a nation when we are not dealing with serious issues of governance, even when it concerns our very survival. I'll stop at this point.
Yes, but I just wanted to let you follow up a little bit on something they gave. I mean, there has to be a reason why there are no seminars for these outstanding revolutionary events. There has to be. Why is it that we do not want our young people to know about it? I mean, people who are not about maybe in their 30s now really only know one government. This is this current Labour government. It has been in office from 2000. Anybody who's in their 30s now will probably not remember any other government except this one. The question is, in the days that you're talking about, people knew what their rights were and they stood up for their rights. When they felt that they were being shortchanged, they stood up and they said they were being shortchanged and they did something about it. When in 1979 it was, where you had Mr. Savre, which was one of the leaders of the Committee for National Salvation, along with people like Eugenia Charles and Rosie Douglas and a number of other people. They stood up and said, look, this is not good for us. It's not working for us. And what happened is that the country was shut down for how many days? You might help me out with that, Louis. That might be about, what, was it 31 days or more than that? The country was cut. I remember Mr. Savre saying the port will not work.
47 days.
47 days strike, 47 days.
Yeah.
And the country will not work. The port will not work. Nothing will work. Brought the country to a standstill. And in those days, I mean, it was done for for reasons that are, not as great and not as grave as those reasons that exist now. For example, the whole question of that airport project, the whole question of a hospital was built, health centers were built, roads are built, bridges are built, and you're not really seeing Dominican entrepreneurs participating in that and becoming wealthy off it, like some of the foreign contractors. And then, of course, this issue, Louis, and I hope Gabriel will comment on that when he comes back on. This issue of electoral reform, the reason why it's so important, because our democracy is driven by good governance. The principles of good governance is what really makes a good democracy. In our case in Dominica, for example, we don't have the universities that are strong where the intellectuals can come out. We don't have the media that is so strong. When the media speaks, people listen, and it affects how people respond in polls and how they feel towards political parties. So we don't have all these strong labor unions that exist like in North America or in England or in France. So when this French prime minister increased the retirement age by 2 years from 62 to 64, almost half of the country went on strike. And here it is that we have contracts like that being given out, not only without any bidding, against the law, but without the approval of the planning authority, without even the knowledge of the planning authority and the approval of the planning authority. So I just want to put it to you, Louis. I mean, how does all of this happen? Is it because we have ensured that our young people have absolutely no knowledge of these things, these revolutionary events that took place and how people stood up in those days? We have totally deprived them of any education about those activities, and therefore this is not in the vocabulary at all. Your thoughts, Louis?
Actually, one of the things that I observe is that there is an attempt to remove any sort of history or any information covering governance prior to 2004.
You see it?
There will be any attempt, all attempts are being made.
Is our email and website under the info?
Gabe, your mic is open. You might want to mute your mic, Gabe.
And
Well,
so that is, we remove all, even, there's even an attempt to remove any remembrance of Rosie Douglas. But you know what has happened? We have a constitution that the people were not participant in. That constitution gave this amount of power to one man who abuses that power. He has taken the power from the people, because the power is supposed to be with the people, coming from the people. But that power has been taken direct, and the people have literally surrendered that power because they don't realize that they can take and should take that back, take that power back, if we want to go anywhere at all. Because unless the people take that power back, they will live in fear constantly, and we are not likely to get the constitutional reform that we've been talking about until and unless our people realize and understand very clearly the power is in their hands. They have only entrusted it to a government for a time. They're holding it in trust. It's not, it belongs to you. So we surrendered the power to them, and we make no attempts. I recall when the last administration acquired the lands at Wesley to build an international airport. They had candlelight vigil. They had all kinds of protests. People who got paid for their property stayed in the property. But now property have been acquired. the property has been turned over to a developer who has signed a contract with the builder, and some people have not even yet got paid for their property. They tell us they're building an airport. It will cost approximately 1.3 billion. They have nothing. Well, I wouldn't even bother to talk about the approval and the board, because because for you to build an airport, I would think, first of all, you have to have the plan, you have the site, you have the plan, you know roughly, you have your analysis done and everything. Then you take it to the planning people for approval to build. This is what we have, this is the land, this is what it's going to cost, and so on. We don't even know how much it is going to cost. No idea. How are you going to know how much the airport is going to cost when you have not even known how much soil are you going to need to excavate, how much soil, how many tons of soil you will have to put there to build up? You have nothing like that. Nothing. It leads me to ask the question, is an airport going to be built at all? If we take example of the Layu River project, how much money was spent? All we have done there is some concrete where even the ground lizards are afraid to go in it.
Well, it was called fraudulent concrete.
Well, that's a good name for it, but even lizards are afraid to even live in it. It is the same thing we have going on with the houses that supposedly this same Abdul Mohammed, that is his name. They're saying Anthony Hayden, I don't know why. His name is Abdul Mohammed. He's a Lebanese. He was a consultant selling passport. All of a sudden, he becomes a developer. Now, he is in control of $4.3 billion outside of the country. He decides who works and who doesn't work in Dominica. Now, I remember one time, I think it was under the late Eugenia Child's administration, she increased some kind of fee. Truck drivers burn tires in the road, they block the road, and now truckers complaining, but they are not doing anything. They're not taking any action because everybody is looking, well, they can go to the prime minister, you'll give them duty free, or they give them a $5 to put gas in the truck. $5 can't put no gas in anything. So our people have subject themselves to fear because fear has been created. You see, they go for opposition members and they go with squad, with AR-15 rifles, AK-47s. That's what they take to go to civilians. And what it is, I think part of this fear is the silence, the deafening silence of like the elite people, the oligarch who enjoy the fruits of the thing, the Bar Association, the DAIC, the church. I remember the Chronicle, which was owned by the Bishop of Roseau, used to be very active in criticism and writing serious things. Now, all these things are going on. Projects without any tendering. Dominicans being left out of the employment thing. A lot of young people leaving school. They can't stay here. They have to run to Guadeloupe, Montserrat, Anguilla, everywhere else. Run from their homeland. Is this all by design? I say it is. It is all by design. You have professionals who've gone to university, studied for years, and you come back and you have somebody who probably has 4 CXC subjects having you like some little yard fowl on the side. This is not what has happened to what I know. Dominicans were capable of. We have an astrophysicist. He lives in Italy. We have a young man from Grand Bay. He was described in a science magazine as the young man who succeeded where Einstein failed in magnetics. This is the quality caliber of people that Dominica produced. We produce one of the greatest minds in theology in the West. These are the kinds of people we produce. Lawyers who are lawyers. Now we have a bar association, we have a judicial system that cause people, that instill more fear in people than anything else. When a sitting judge will tell you that no court will rule against a sitting government, what is the court for? The court is the referee between a rogue government and the populace. But if the court has joined the side of the rogue team, what happens? It's like the football referee taking a side.
Well, clearly, Louis, we have to analyze those things. And Gib, I just wanted to ask you to come in here because you remember there was a time when civics was taught in school, civic education. People were told to understand their civic rights, their civic responsibilities. So we agreed with that and we went out when we left school and we carried our civic responsibilities. If we felt that something that was worth fighting for, we fought for it. So it was our right to do so. You remember when UW was in office in 1995, 2000, that period, people were not afraid to speak. People spoke out. As a matter of fact, they had cartoons showing UW in a blue jail, and they said UW was corrupt. And people,
Mr. Gregoire, let me stop you and let you know that the young man on there called Louis Robinson has a certain relative who he knows quite well. And one of her children, during the COVID epidemic, said, "Daddy, you have some tapes there, the VHS, they're getting brittle. You need to do something with them." They were tapes from the 1990s, some during the time of the UWP. So I went and I got a scientist in Baltimore County to digitize some of those tapes. And Brother Louis will be happy to know, through the intervention of his relative, on one of those tapes, lo and behold, prophecy revealed. I saw one Anthony Astafan. I saw Brother Egbert Jermaine. And I saw Yvonne Asif. They were on a program talking about good governance.
Good and accountable governance.
Amen. You thank you very much, Sheridan. It means that the neurons and the electrons are still sparking. And I said to myself, wonders shall never cease. 3, I cannot put Brother Jermaine in that. I think he's retired in Florida someplace. But I'm well advised. I'm reliably informed rather that Anthony Astafan has resigned the position of an advocate for good governance in his actions and his utterances, and has not gone on radio in recent times to call for commission of inquiry into MMC. Has not with Yvonne Asif gone on radio in recent times or TV to call for commission of inquiry into the appointments of crooks, gangsters, mafiosi, banditti as ambassadors for the Commonwealth of Dominica. Have not in recent times gone on TV or radio to ask for a commission of inquiry into the passport sales and the missing 4.3 billion. That they have not in recent times gone on radio or television to ask for the enforcement of the Finance Act or the Procurement Act, all of which are mercilessly violated by the current administration led by the oligarch himself. So, it is good to have history. Louis says something that's worth reminding. There's a reason why they do not want to teach civics in school. You see, somewhere I learned that children are what they learn. And because we were value engineered, call it colonial if you may, by a certain system, which resided in a book called The Student Companion, we were religiously schooled in that value system that says as follows: birds of a feather flock together. Waste not, want not. Honesty is the best policy. Our parents would tell us things like, you cannot be wrong and strong. And so nurtured in that environment, it's no wonder that in our golden years, we have not lost the value system, that our struggling parents, they may not have had doctor degrees, you see, but they had decency. They may not have had PhDs, you see, but they had dignity. They may not have had BS and BA, but they had bravery. And so it's no wonder that Lambie and yourself and all those who support the democracy movement, the resistance in Dominica, were nurtured in that system of civic education, which is now absent in any meaningful way from our educational curriculum. And for that reason, we do not have children and leaders of character. People, as Louis said, who are now afraid of their own shadows, afraid to speak, because they do not know our history of freedom. Struggle resides in resistance and standing up for what is right, no matter the odds, you see. Our poor Kalinago warrior ancestors and Maroon ancestors, they faced
Your audio is off. Your audio is off, Gabe.
they did not falter nor fail. Our valiant Kalinago ancestors and Maroon warriors stood the test of time. And Dr. Fontaine, in his eloquence and his outstanding book, revealed to us that in the debates on the abolition of slavery for the entire British Empire, Dominica was constantly referenced. In fact, there's a letter that Ainsley, the governor, wrote. He said that, and I quote, "The Maroons have lost all fear. They traverse the island as if it is their own, and they've created, in his words, an imperio in imperium," meaning that they had created a state within a state. That was the history. But they will never allow Dr. Fontaine's book to be used, because what they need in Dominica now is slaves and slave masters. That's the society that has been cultivated by a party that has lost its way and has nothing to do with the Labour Party heritage, which is a party heritage of bravery, of decency, of equality, of fairness. All of those things have been obliterated from the vocabulary of the ruling oligarchy and its foreign puppet masters.
Yes, and I want to just let everybody know that we will take your calls, and I'm going to ask Lambie to give the people the numbers that they can call. And while we're waiting for the calls, I will come back. But on the other side of that slight break there, to start taking the calls, I want to put it to Louis and to Gabe that you see all of what we're saying there, that people really are not following the civic responsibilities and not have no knowledge of civic rights, or they pretend they don't have knowledge of that, the constitutional rights, the human rights, the civil liberties. But these things are there. They're enshrined in the democracy that we have. People should not be fearful to exercise those rights. Well, here's what I'm going to say that, and I'm going to tie this into this whole business of good governance, because it is with good governance that you're going to get the proper policies and the proper strategies to build an economy, to lift people out of poverty and mendicancy and help them to grow wealth, right? To become wealthy. All right. And so try that in as soon as you give the numbers out, Lambie. I want to tie that into one of the things that's facing us now is the whole question of free and fair elections and electoral reform. And I say that to say that people seem to be afraid to gather and assemble in large numbers and express their desire for free and fair elections. There's absolutely nothing wrong with assembling in massive numbers and say, listen, I want electoral reform. Now the question is, will they get it without gathering in those numbers? I have my doubts. From everything that I've been seeing, I have my doubts as to whether it will be given to them willingly. Why do I say that? Because there was a famous email that said, listen, madness going on down there. These people want to do all kind of things, to clean voters list and re-register people and so on, and that will affect your election winning legacy. So that tells you that's a reason why Somebody does not want it because it will affect the election winning legacy. They're not going to give it to you. They'll give you something, but nothing that is going to give you the type of campaign finance reform that's going to prevent bribery and cheating. Nothing that's going to allow you to have enough time to raise money by the time they say, okay, an election is going to be 30 days from now, right? But by that time, they spend the whole year getting all the election paraphernalia. All of that, they've hired all of their people who are going to have their big shows and so on. So by the time that thing comes around, the other people in the opposition, they have very little time to do anything to raise money. And then if they tell you that the election campaign reporting period is in that small window, it means that all the billions and millions that have been spent before that date of the reporting, they don't have to account for it. Now, it seems to me if that is a kind of electoral reform that is going to be given, I don't think Dominicans should want it. And that is why I say, Louis and Gabe, from the point of view of electoral reform, and we can talk about the details of that a little bit when we come back from Lambi, is that Dominicans have to decide if they really want free and fair elections and if they really want electoral reform. I think they have to stand up and demand it. They're not going to get it otherwise. Lambi, let's give the folks the numbers so they can make a few calls if they'd like to.
Mr. G, you have a situation where people cannot even walk in the city. They cannot walk in the city. If a basic thing like walking, you are prevented from walking in the city, and then you go out in the country to walk, and the administration sends police because an individual say you're not walking through Wesley. The government sends the police to make sure that an individual says you're not walking through Wesley, that people should not walk through Wesley. People have reason to fear. You have people being persecuted day and night, facilitated by the justice system.
You see, but Louis, people have to know their rights. And I think that
Exactly.
people have the right to walk, people have the right to assemble, they have the right to free speech. These rights are guaranteed under the Constitution of the country. And people should not be fearful of exercising their rights under the Constitution, under the law, no matter what anybody says. Lambi, let's give the numbers out.
Good evening. You're tuned to the Global Viewing Queue. The numbers to contact us are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. These are all local numbers, and the international number is 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers again. 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, local numbers. International number 305-432-9624, and we already have a caller. Good evening, caller. Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good evening to the panel.
Good evening.
Yeah, awesome presentations. Again, it's so good when you highlight, these historical things. It's very important, the stories. People have to know them so that they can be inspired, I hear everything here tonight, and I applaud it. And I think we're on the cusp of trying again to see if we can achieve a different result. And I hope we can delve more into that civic aspect of the conversations as we move forward, because I think part of the reason why we have also, achieved some failures has been the overemphasis, that left out the civic aspect of the conversation. And I think when we address things like electoral reform, which are things of the Constitution, I think we have a good opportunity to have a civic confrontation with the government. And I think we should keep that in the front, and we should, with this thing at the end of the month, I hope we can spend more time on these programs, really amplifying why and when, and like I say, Gregoire, I applaud you, amplifying that spirit tonight, because that's what we have to wake up. But I just want us to not spend too much time in the political conversation for those next set of times. Let's focus on maybe we can make a change on the 31st, if we spend more time on the other parts of things, Peace and blessings. God bless.
Blessings as well.
Thank you, Zed. Thank you, Zed.
We have another call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Gentlemen. While it's all well and good that we are there speaking about all different things of Dominica and electoral reform and everything, Skerrit is delaying time so he could put himself to the next presidency. He will be the next president of Dominica if we delay and waste our time talking about what should be done and what should not be done. We need to wake up and get ourselves out there. We need to put a stop in Dominica and now, before it's too late. I find, yes, it's all well and good on the radio talking up and down and everything, but we need to put a stop because Kerry plan is already on its way for him to be the next presidency. Whilst we stay and just chat about what we have to do and what we don't have to do, and we're doing nothing. Thank you, gentlemen.
And thank you so much for that.
Can I ask the caller a question? In that,
let's take one more call before you go. Yeah.
Good evening, caller on the international line. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. I tuned in a little late, so I'm not too sure if I'm off topic, but it's something that I really wanted to talk about. I mean, I tried to call Matt today because I really wanted to talk about it. It has to do with the economy and employment. And I'm not sure if any of you guys know if there's any organization or like the labor division that has control on how much, for instance, a laborer or a plumber or an electrician should get paid. Because I can't understand for the life of me, and this is first-hand information, because I have a brother who is a laborer back home, and I mean, he gets like $60, $70 a day. And I just can't understand that because Antigua is just on the other side and they get like $150 a day. Even today, I called a developer in Antigua and I just wanted to be sure of the numbers. And I said to him, how much do you pay a laborer per day? And he said, I have a lot of Dominicans that work with me. I love them to work with me. They work very well. And I pay them $150 a day and they won't accept anything less. He said, just on Sunday, I had some guys casting the floor. And each of the guys, I had to pay $300 for their day. And they worked for 4 hours. And this is just in Antigua. So, I mean, something has to bend. I just can't understand $60, $70 a day. How a young man has to pay his bill can live on that. And it's been happening for a while. I spoke about it last year. And it's still happening. Even today, I called and it's like $70 a day. So I don't know. There got to be some, maybe the labor division, if anybody has any information as to how much a laborer should get paid in Dominica, please let me know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. Excellent contribution. Lumbi, you take another call?
Yes, this final call. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please. You're listening to your radio. Are you still there?
Yes, sir.
But go ahead. Turn your radio down.
Yes, sir. I don't mean to change your topic, but I wanted to ask a question because it's something that's always on my mind. What I'm trying to ask you all, we got independent in Dominica from England at what year? I think it's 1978 or 1979.
78.
Right. So what I was trying to say is, for me, the date they gave us the independence, to me, anybody that born before that date should be able to get a British passport. Am I wrong or right? Think about it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
For that. We'll try to deal with that later. But Gable, I mean, you've heard some of the callers in contribution. This last lady who called, I mean, she's obviously concerned about what is going on in the economy, what is concerned about the wages that are being paid and whatnot. As we said earlier, good governance is what is going to result in, leveling the playing field and ensuring that people are treated equally and everybody has a chance to grow wealth. And so I think that is an important question. This is all part of what we're talking about. But the whole thing is, and I think Zed, it was, I think I can call his name, who spoke a while ago, and he said, listen, yes, there's a lot of politics, and we can talk about all those things. We can talk about the civics, but in actual fact, we have something that is facing us right now. And people are saying, listen, we want free and fair elections. And then it does not appear it's going to be handed to them on a silver platter. And they're talking about we want to get re-registration in Dominica to ensure that you remove all the dead people's name from the list, right? We want to ensure, in other words, there are certain things that people want in terms of these reforms, campaign finance reform, the period for reporting on campaign financing, and all of that, the campaign reporting period. Gable, we are not going to get good governance unless we have free and fair elections. If it's going to be lopsided, so the playing field is not level, so one political party can have $670 million and the other one doesn't have that, it's not going to work. So your thoughts, Mark?
I agree. The last maybe election that had any semblance of freedom and fairness to it was maybe 2005. Since that time, we've not had fair and fair elections in Dominica. The reality is, it's not simply about purging the voters list and ID cards, it's also campaign finance reform. When the
Your audio went off a little bit.
when the prime minister is asked about the source of funds, and his response is none of your damn business. That's the most awful, dictatorial, arrogant statement that one can make. And so, in that kind of dictatorial fashion of a one-party state, it's no wonder that people keep fleeing, because you see, one of the things that you have with dictatorships is they are usually very inefficient in the creation of jobs. Even the Chinese Communist Party, what they did was that they maintained the political hegemony, but they freed the marketplace in a way that allowed for some private enterprise to boost their economy. But the reality is, it generally does not work. And we certainly don't want to live in China. The average Dominican wants to be able to have the freedom to associate with whomever he wants, to worship wherever he wants, to have his or her own opinion. And to the young lady, I say, yes, there used to be a labor commissioner in Dominica when I grew up. There used to be a Department of Social Welfare in Dominica when I grew up. But the most important thing she needs to recognize, and she can contact me offline, is that we used to have an institutionalized trade union movement with about 3 or 4 unions. And those unions were exactly that, trade unions. They advocated for the various trades. So if you were a stevedore, for instance, a public servant, you're an electrician, you're whatever, you had the trades being represented. Here in the United States, you have the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBW. And they speak to the people in the legislature. They advocate for minimum wage. And they set labor standards in coordination with the public sector and the political actors in the legislature. Just like Brother Sheridan told us in the time of Eugenia Childs, the Employers Federation, who represented the interest of the employers, petitioned the government or met with the prime minister so that they could advocate for their position.
Now,
so in absence of that organized effort, we're not going anywhere.
We actually got a policy review committee institutionalized to have regular dialogue with the cabinet of the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to the young lady, you finally, I will conclude in responding to a very well posed and so on question. You cannot squeeze blood out of stone, out of a turnip, as they say. The economy is what really generates the wage rate. So if you have a dong economy, where very little, apart from passport sales, are being had, you don't expect to have a flourishing industrial base where people are competing for jobs, and where, of course, the market sets high wages. You don't expect that, you see? Where the government is the only game in town, don't expect that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that Louis.
Yes, you hear me?
Let me just.
Is my mic on?
Your mic is on. I'm hearing you very well. I was even hearing the conversation you were having a while ago on your phone. So you might, when you're having your phone conversation, you might need to mute your mic. But Louis, here's the thing that, we're really talking now about the whole question of human rights, constitutional rights, civil liberties. These are all the things that civic rights and civic responsibilities. These are all the things that Gabriel Christian talked about a little earlier, and you commented on. The fact of the matter is, if Dominicans really want, and Lam, you want to take a call before we go on? Go right ahead.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Lambi and Mr. G, Brother Gebu, and my friend Louis. What's up, man?
I'm good.
Good evening. Yeah, I'm good, man. Very interesting conversation as usual. But Mr. G, listen to this, right? Right now, I'm looking at the whole situation from a different point of view. And that is, as Brother Gebu had started off, in that democracy has a great deal to do with law and order, the rule of law. If your laws are not respected, or these people are supposed to enforce the laws and take an oath again to uphold and obey the Constitution, they are the ones that's violating it. We have a big, major problem. Now, our Constitution itself, Gebu, states that Dominica shall be a democratic republic. So our job is to maintain and protect and secure our democratic system. Now, to have a strong democratic system, that's where free and fair election has to be the foundation of this democratic system. The rule of law, as I said. A government for the people, by the people, of the people. Brother Gebu, I'm sorry to say we don't have that.
You're right.
We lost that. So what I'm saying now, with all this saga that's going on with Dennis Byron, I am no more confident in that electoral reform system. Because the whole process, for example, we have to be begging Roosevelt we have to be begging Roosevelt for electoral reform. When he is a participant, he has nothing to do with it. All the executive, whichever administration is in power, all the executive have to do is provide the necessary reform so that the electoral commission, which is or shall or should be independent, to execute their duties. Again, we don't have that. So the choice we have right now is the people. The people have to, we can make a case, a strong case, as to why Roosevelt Skerrit must resign, he and his entire crew. And then we will, as you mentioned, with the interim government, we can put in an interim government for 6 months and give them a mandate to execute that electoral reform. So we could have free and fair election. So whoever wins it, once it's free and fair, we all will agree with the result. Because all that beating around the bush, Mr. G, I'm very, very sorry to say, it doesn't mean nothing. Because Roosevelt Skerrit and right now Dennis Byron, what happened to the report? At this stage, the people haven't even seen the report. The report should go to the Electoral Commission. Then the Electoral Commission should bring it to the people so we know what we get in. We don't want no jamasa. You cannot just run parliament and tell us you're passing law, giving us. We don't know what you're going to give us. I have no confidence in these guys because we know the main focus is to maintain the legacy, is to stay in power and to rob the resources of the country. And it's time for us to make that case based on our democratic system, based on the Constitution, what the law requires from any administration.
Okay, caller, thank
you.
You
understand? That is the stand we should take. Right now, I just want Roosevelt Skerrit to go, and that's what we have to consider. The effort should be to demand his resignation because he has violated the law, he has violated his oath of office. There's too much corruption. Our law and our constitution is not respected. There's too many issues concerning good governance we cannot settle for. Thank you, sir. I'm listening.
Thank you for
Mr.
that.
G,
Now,
can,
just one
can,
second. Let me just say this. Governments are elected by the people in Dominica. Governments can be removed by the people in Dominica if they want to remove the government. Now, I'm hearing people are talking about what should be done and to remove. The point is, if Dominicans decide to gather in very significant numbers and they demand certain things of the government, they will get it. But if they do not have the courage and if they don't understand the constitutional rights and the civic responsibilities to demand for what is right for their country and for themselves and for their future generations, then they may not do it. But it seems to me that is what has happened in the past. We've seen in the past that people have gathered in massive numbers and said, this is what we need for the development of our country. Louis, go ahead.
yes, as I was saying, there are 2 points that one that Zed Lloyd made causing the civics, and the second that Leroy made the Constitution. I think very few people in Dominica understand that Dominica is actually a republic. That's what the Constitution says. It is a republic. Secondly, on the issue of the civics, a very, very close friend of mine and I decided that the way we can resolve this problem is to form little cells of 5, 6 in each constituency and teach these people basic civics. Start from the scratch, and then you bring in maybe people like Gabo, maybe people like Mr. G, or people like lawyers or past parliamentarians to talk to them about this whole thing, the civics, including the Constitution, what their responsibilities are. And then you maybe bring 3 groups together at one time, then you bring another, and then maybe you bring all of them together and you get people to community. So they will go up to their peers in terms of, okay, this is our civic duty, this is what we're supposed to know. We're supposed to know who is the minister of things. We used to know every minister of government, every permanent secretary. We used to know who they were. We used to know had to know who was the director of public works and these sorts of things. So being from there, but it's a long way because you have to teach these people, and the answer always comes to money. Because you send these people out there and they may be walking, talking to people, meet people and talk to them. They may need a bottle of water. They may need a sandwich, they're hungry. And so you have to come up with those things. And part of the problem, I think, that the government does is they try to bleed the opposition of funding. So then they can call the snap election and say they caught them off pants because they don't give them time to raise funds. If you have the opposition in court constantly, I mean, they can't even plan their lives because they don't know when they will haul them into court. And so this is part of the civics lesson that people have to understand. This whole thing is the people are being abused and re-abused again, disrespected. They've taken away their rights, their power under the law. The people, the power should always be with the people. It's like you loan it to the politician for a period of time. I remember once when the former Prime Minister, Mr. Edison James, was the Prime Minister, and there was some, senior civil servants that were very, negative and grumbling. And so I said to him, I don't transfer these guys, to them in some ministry. He said, look, I am only passing. They are public servants. They are here to stay. I'm only passing. It is not in me to do those sorts of things. We don't have that kind of governance anymore. We have someone who disrespects the Constitution, disrespects the law. All our institutions have been undermined, disassembled. They're not functional. All our institutions have become dysfunctional. We take the welfare department, we turn it into a red clinic. We take the police force, we turn it into the military arm of the Labour Party. We take the court, the judicial system, and we have weaponized the judicial system against the opposition, anybody that doesn't think like the government. And so these are tremendous problems and odds that only the people can correct. I mean, at one point in time, people were talking about leadership. It is not the leadership can go out there. It is the people who must be there, show up to support that push. Because if the leaders keep going there, they will just laugh at them, make fun of them, go to the parliament. And the other thing is, you have a parliament where it seems as though not even the speaker knows the rules. They keep calling people out, but they can't quote the rules. It is because our people are not aware of their duty, their rights and responsibilities. The speaker is not an elected member. He's just to facilitate the discussion in the House. If you want to put, you should be quoting what rule is it that the person violated. When last anybody read a Hansard? You know the Hansard? Hansard is the record of the House of Assembly. But our people seem to be far from that. We don't have much of these anymore. I don't even see official gazettes anymore. We don't see those things.
I really wanted us to, we have to look at the history, and you have to look at really what ought to obtain, because that was obtained in the past and it works much better. It facilitated the democracy. The Constitution was respected. The rule of law was respected. So you had good governance. I mean, nobody can complain about governance under Edward LeBlanc. I mean, how could you? You had good governance. Gibbo, the point I'm making is this. When we look at all of what we're talking about, and we've been talking about that and talking about that for days and for months and for years, all these problems, there is an opportunity, because this thing called electoral reform and campaign finance reform, that is the thing that is facing every Dominican right now. I think the majority of people in all political parties, in all civic organizations, want electoral reform. Lambi, you want to take a call before I go on?
Yes. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good night. Are you hearing me clearly?
Clearly.
Oh, okay. Station's in the house. It's a good night to you, gentlemen, and the panel board, and the rest of Dominica. I'm listening and I called some time ago, and I find it very interesting, very interesting. Looking at all that was said and have been said over the years, the all gentlemen panel discussion on maths and other civil discussion. My question is, what kind of a mechanism, strategy we can put or develop or put into action or into effect that will mobilize and somehow eliminate or eradicate that fear from the people? And I was thinking over the years, in the book of Joshua, the scripture says, when Joshua died, after Joshua died, there rose a generation that did not know God. Now, gentlemen, think about it. From Moses to Joshua, the death of Joshua, there rose a people, a generation that did not know God. How was that possible? Think about that. Now, it brings it back to our young people in Dominica. I believe, with all of my heart, Mr. Lambi is from Margaret. I'm from Margaret. Mr. Robinson is from Margaret. I don't think this is the same Mr. Robinson I know. And Mr. Robinson, this is Ashley's boy speaking here. And Mr. Lambi, you know me very well, Ashley's boy.
Okay.
You know? Yes. And there was, you gentlemen can I tell you what I'm going to say. In my young days, there was one thing I respect about the seniors. They were among the young people playing draft and dominoes. And we had respect for you gentlemen. But the conversation was very intriguing. It was very enticing. It would make us sit and listen, and we would learn. But there is that gap between the senior and this generation. So to mobilize, I believe some of the seniors have to come back out. They have to go back to the old foundation, come back out and meet with the young people, socialize. So that because there's a generation that does not know anything about Patrick John Days and Melissa Charles. Even some don't know about the days of the when Mr. Edison James was in power. Some don't even know about that. So I didn't even know that Dominica had a constitution. I went to junior school up towards at the time the word government school. I didn't even know or heard that we had a constitution. I didn't heard about that. It's like a station. I didn't realize. I think it came from the Rasta, I think Mr. Aaron Angelo, who spoke about the Constitution. Then I didn't even know Dominica had a real Constitution, and I didn't even know what the Constitution stated. It's ignorance. And that's what happened, right? The killer people were defeated. There rose of people that did not know God. So there right now is in Dominica a generation that does not know what even you were speaking about. How are we going to set something? That's my question. What can we put into effect? What type of mechanism that we can establish to somehow bring back that boldness and to eradicate that fear from our young people and from? I think there needs to be a bridging of the gap between the senior and this present generation. I'm listening, gentlemen. Very interesting subject. I'm listening.
And thank you so much for that. Gabo, I think the callers are saying the same thing. We've been saying the same thing. And I think it is left to all of the different organizations, political parties, civic organizations, to come together and provide that education, that information to the young people. There is this gap, as we acknowledged. The current generation now, they only know one government.
Let me, the last caller made a very solid point, and I endorse everything he has said. Not only do they not know God in the truest sense, because what they've given them is the God of Baal, the God of money, of things, of materialism, mansions on a hill where there's no public library. Listen to me carefully. There are several mansions that have been built within the past 10 years. They're building a $1.3 billion airport, my friends, by some mystery man from the Middle East, whose allies have engorged themselves with passport money and have hotels in their name. But they do not have in our country a public library that was donated since 1905, repaired with a roof. Lambi, how much would it cost to put a roof on the public library?
A whole lot, because the basic structure is in place.
When you grew up in Dominica, Lambi, I know you're about 16 now. When you grew up in Dominica, there was a public library. Am I correct?
Oh, yes.
Sheridan, I know you're about 12 years now. When you grew up in Dominica, there's a public library. Am I correct?
Well, I'm only 11, but I still remember the public library.
Louis, well, boy, when you were 6 years old, there was a public library in Dominica. Am I correct?
There was even a mobile library.
Well, there we go. So
even
there we go.
Mobile, they would come to the school.
Thank you, Brother Louis. Thank you for the further illumination of the importance that prior governments saw in educating a nation. What we have now is the dumbing down of a nation. You cannot have mathematics and physics if you don't have civics, Mathematics and physics mean nothing without civics, because civics really pertain to how you run a society in a civilized manner. And so if you do not have a library where you can educate a nation in its responsibilities, where young boys and girls on a Saturday afternoon or in an evening can go and have interaction with the learned ones, with the books of great civilizations and great leaders. Instead, you have a Pied Piper of misdirection, leading our nation like rats to be drowned.
Gabo, you have to understand, Gabo, that we understand about civics very well, because remember, Marigot was the infancy of village councils throughout the entire Caribbean. So we understood very long time ago the need for good governance, and it had to start from somewhere, from its infancy. And so that is how, in fact, remember before, people were selected from the village councils or these things in the village. That is how it came. It is, as I suggested earlier, it is since 2004 that they just go and pick somebody and put them to run without any knowledge, any experience. Like look at the last reset. You take people who basically never even serve as a secretary to a little club, and you put them in the parliament. What do you expect? We have somebody who advises the prime minister's chief advisor. He knows nothing about economics. He did food technology. He cannot get a job. He couldn't get a job at Bello putting pepper in a bottle, but he's advising on economics. Look at the demise of the banking, the financial services sector in Dominica, where people lost millions of dollars to an insurance company. The financial services sector is not just National Bank. It includes the insurance companies, the mortgage companies, the credit union, the banks, the offshore banks as well. And all these issues, the administration has no idea. I have not seen this government. They know nothing about monetary policy. They know nothing about fiscal policy. Just look at what they do for a budget. They pass a budget, and then a couple months later, they come for a supplemental 30% of the budget. If you bring a supplement, you're supposed to bring it within 4 months of it. They wait till a year and months before. All this is violation of the Constitution. And yet, there's a speaker of the House. Well, you can't bring this to Parliament now. The Public Accounts Committee report, they have not had a report since 2000 and maybe 2000. If the Prime Minister doesn't bring, the Speaker has an obligation to bring it before the Parliament. And all these things happen and people don't say anything because you had people talking about Public Accounts Committee and Public Accounts, but they are not aware that the leader of the opposition cannot bring it to the floor. It is the leader of the House. All that is the civics that they need to learn and understand. Then people can mobilize to demand those things be done according to our laws, according to our Constitution, and good governance. Restore our institutions of governance, restore the civil service, restore the police force to decency, restore our courts.
Yeah, but Gabo, you're not going to
let me say something, Brother Lambi, before the person comes on, in support of what Brother Louis has said, but also in response to the last caller. We have this phone. We have this phone. When we grew up, to take a picture, we needed a camera. To do a recording, we needed a tape recorder. To do a movie, we needed a movie camera. You know, I have all of this in this phone. Dominicans who are listening, use your phones to educate yourselves. And for the older ones who remember what it was like when we had trade unions and student organizations and employer federation and the growing economy, tape record in 5 and 10 minutes the persons of that generation of Lambi's age, Louis' age, Sheridan's age, and post it on Facebook, post it on Instagram, because that is your generation. Social media. 5 minutes. Who are you? Where were you born? When were you born? Where did you go to school? What was it like in Dominica of your time? What was it like in Dominica before independence? What did you expect of an independence? How do you see things now? Use the phone, therefore, as an instrumentality of our liberation, not a tool just to pass jokes and to waste time. This is a very important device for liberation if we use it wisely. That's my response to the gentleman who called a moment ago.
And let's take a call, Lambi.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Dominica. Good evening. Good program. Guys, I want to take it from that angle. Here we fighting for election reform. We need to start putting up banner. People with private property, let us come together, put a banner saying that we need election reform. Yes, but I observe Skerrit is cornered. Skerrit is desperate. He has done so much evil financially. Look at Choksey, the matter with Choksey. Do you believe Tony Astafans in Antigua by coincidence?
They are doing everything in their power to see if Trotsy will go away. But I have seen program with Trotsy, and I can tell you, Sheridan and the Dominica police force is in real fire. Meanwhile, Dominicans, the labor rights, are encouraging Sheridan. Sheridan, no. When it comes to the international public, Dominica is in a problem. Sheridan is desperate, and because he's desperate, he is not going to make election reform easy for Dominicans. He's going to tighten up the noose around our neck. So we have to find creative ways. One of the ways that we can deal with that, let us volunteer in every way possible. Let us make banners. Let us put big billboards in properties saying election reform. $4.2 billion is missing. Scary. There is an indictment on Scary. The way he spent Dominican money, not putting that money in the consolidated funds. In that case, Scary, a warrant should be out for Scary. So in always you watch Scary, he is in a desperate mood, and he's not going to make election reform easy for Dominicans. So we have to take it another way. We got to fight.
Thank you,
Let
caller.
us volunteer in every way. Let we get books. Let we get exercise books. Distribute it to the students, and it write big and bold on it, election reform. Let's get pencils, election reform, give it to the children. When we have the hearts of the children, we have the nation. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for that. Lambi, but in the last few minutes that we have, Gable, I think we need to focus, because in fact, all of the callers are saying more or less the same thing. They're saying, listen, we've been talking about so many things for so long, and those things are to do with good governance, really. All of those issues we're talking about are to do with good governance or poor governance. And we're saying that this country has an opportunity at this point in time to get free and fair elections by ensuring that they get proper electoral reforms that is going to level the playing field to have a good chance of getting a free and fair election and hopefully good governance. That is what it's all about. Now, I don't think you ought to be too creative. It's done before. You don't have to be very creative for all of the civic groups and the political parties and everybody to come together under one umbrella, just like they did in 79 under the Committee for National Salvation, and say, listen, we have a righteous cause. It is our constitutional right. It's our civic responsibility to come together and say, look, all these things, this proliferation of things that's taking place in our society, in our economy, is not right. Or people are getting poorer while foreigners are getting richer, right? So we need to do something about the mendicancy and the poverty in our society. We need to do about escalating crime. We need to do something about the fact that people don't even feel free to be able to speak freely anymore in their own communities. So, Gabo, it seems to me this one thing that is ahead of us, and I think Zed Lloyd mentioned it when he called. He said, Dominicans say they really want electoral reform. Nobody's going to give it to them on a silver platter. Not anybody who has an interest in the elections going one way or another. Everybody have to get together and say, listen, we want to level the playing field. We want free and fair elections, so every political party will have an equal chance to win. So you have to then come on a platform, not with CO, not with all kind of things, but you have to come with your policies and you try to tell us, okay, this is what you're going to do for us, the people. This is how you're going to help us to get jobs and to get wealth and so on, and growth, so that we can sit in our households, we can sit in our communities, in our society generally. And so that is what you want. The question is, I understand there is an activity on the 31st. I'll be interested in seeing how the organizers are going about doing this, if they're going to involve everybody in it, like was done in 79, so that all of the political parties, all the civic organizations can come together and say, something, this is a worthy cause. Electoral reform, free and fair elections, protection of our democracy, reinstatement of the pillars of our democracy, the institutions of our democracy. And Gabo, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I don't think you have to be too creative for Dominicans at home and abroad, and for friends of Dominica at home and abroad, to come together and say, something, Let us meet in large gatherings and peacefully demand this is what we want. These are our rights to have that. We want free and fair elections, and we really want to get it now. Your thoughts?
Brother G, I endorse everything you've said. We cannot do it without unity of purpose. I'm going to do something creative tonight. There's a great American singer, civil rights advocate called Peter Seeger. He had a song. I want you to listen to it for a moment because it speaks to exactly what we need in Dominica now. You see, what this regime has done, it has turned brother against sister, sister against mother, mother against father, divided families, divided communities with this vicious partisanship and dog-eat-dog society. We want a society of kindness, peace, and love. We want a society of solidarity. And so I want you to listen carefully to what this song says, because it speaks to that one word. I knew Zed Lloyd as a student. Listen carefully. So, Brother G, I make the request that Q95 make that the theme song between now and the 31st. That the feeble strike of one can never overcome, but the union of all forces makes us strong. When all Dominicans understand that we're more than labor, we're more than freedom, we're more than UWP, but that we are Dominicans, that we as patriotic Dominicans can come together and rescue our country from the contempt and the disrespect and the savage tyranny that's been inflicted on us, where we now look at each other not as friends and neighbors and family and brothers and sisters, loving each other, walking hand in hand to build the beloved community, then of course we have failed. And Haiti and all other failed states await those who fail in their duty. But if we embrace our duty, if we embrace the dignity and the pride and the wisdom of our forefathers and our foremothers, as Brother Louis says and Brother Lambert endorsed, and as you said, Brother G, our Kalinago warriors, our Maroons, those persons who were able to lose their fare, the union of all patriotic forces coming together will rescue us from a more pernicious colonialism than we knew when we grew up. A time when we had dignity and pride and hope in the expectation of a new birth of freedom. Let that new birth of freedom come forth on the 31st of May. Solidarity forever. My friends, let us have solidarity and let us use the smartphones, brothers and sisters, dearly beloved, to educate, not to pass jokes or caustic remarks, but to educate. Speak to your elders. Let's have that engagement between old and young, young and old, working together, and we'll have a better Dominica.
Yeah, then rightfully so. And Louis, all good things sometimes very quickly come to an end. But I think the callers are right. I've been hearing people calling Q95, calling the hot seat, calling the talk on the block on match shows, and saying maybe there's too much talking going on. And of course, there has to be talk so people can get the information and the education that's required. How else do you do it? Even when you go and do it in small groups and communities, it's the same thing. You're going to have to talk to people. People have to talk to each other and come to a common understanding as what is best for everyone. And I think Gabriel has it right. People have to be in solidarity with each other. I mean, you cannot continue this thing about you're not talking to your neighbor, some people in families not talking to each other, they vex with each other. That cannot make sense. It cannot be that way. How are you going to build a society like that? So people have to work together. There was the concept of kudme. People built houses like that, and people, oh no, everybody came and gave each other a hand, a helping hand to build their homes and to make their gardens and so on. They could make a living. That's how people helped each other. Louis, in your closing remarks, there's something else you wanted to add, and in your closing remarks, let's address our mind to those things, because ultimately, I think we have a moment in time right now, right here and now, that is going to help us as a generation right now. The young people, we've been talking to young people, everybody's talking to young. It is young people in times past, historically, have been the leaders of change in any society, It is the young people who really have been on the front lines of change in the Caribbean, the world over. And here's the point I'm making, Louis. There is a moment now that is upon us. Dominicans want to get electoral reform so they can have a level playing field to have free and fair elections, so they have a good chance then of getting good governance. Let the chips fall where they may. Put all the right laws in place, all the regulations in place. It doesn't have to favor any one political party. It just has to be the right regime of laws and regulations. And then you have to put the right people in place who are going to enforce those laws and implement those regulations. Because even if you have laws and regulations and you have square pegs in round holes that have some political interest, is not genuine interest in ensuring that the laws and the regulations are implemented in the proper sense. If they're going to turn a blind eye on people who are breaking the laws or not paying attention to the regulations, it's still not going to work. And I'll give you a good example. It is the Electoral Reform Commission. If the Electoral Commission is made up of 3 people who are on the side of the government and 2 on the side of the opposition, it just cannot work. They're always in a majority. The Electoral Commission is intended under the Constitution to be an independent body. I think it should be restructured, reconstituted, so that the influence of any one political party can be eliminated. That is my view. That Electoral Commission needs to be reconstituted, so you remove the political How on earth can anyone send an email to say, look, these guys in the Electoral Commission are trying to change things? You will lose your winning legacy. You got to stop it. And then somebody goes around and changes 2 members of the Electoral Commission, and years later now, you still cannot get the electoral reform that the commission itself, which is rightfully its duty and responsibility, that embarked upon that, and that was stopped. Members were changed, and up to today, we're still fighting for it. So, Louis, here's what I think. I think let us forget about other things for one moment, because I think right now there is a moment in time when all Dominica can focus, as Gabriel is saying, solidarity. Let's unionize everybody together under one roof and say, listen, let's get that one thing done, and let's put that behind us. Antigua has done it. St. Kitts has done it. Barbados has done it. All the other islands have done it. Why is Dominica the only one that does not want to do it? I'm saying let's put everything aside and say, you know something, let us get together, whether it's on the 31st or whatever date that the organizers plan. Let everybody put their heads under one hat and say, listen, you know, we're going to gather in massive numbers and very peacefully demand we want electoral reform. And here's what we want: A, B, C, D, E. And say to the Electoral Commission, not to the government, not to the Labour Party, but to the Electoral Commission, this is what the people want. And if they really want it, they will get it. Louis, your thoughts as we close? Your mic is muted, Louis.
As I said, exactly what you just said there, Mr. G, is exactly where my thoughts are. It's something I've said. We do not ask, people don't ask a government for anything. You take it, it is yours. You only ask for something that somebody has and you want them to do you a favor. So we sit down there and I hear people say they're asking things to resign. Government not going to resign. We want electoral reform, as Mr. G says. And as I said, well, I talk about constitutional reform. And I say it's not the government that's going to give it to you. The people get together, they draft what they want, And they take it to the government and say, this is what we want. But if you're sitting down there waiting for the government to say, oh, well, this is what we... No, we must not. You see, I know I come up, in a very kind of militant society, very militant. I was in the trade union. Trade union movement is a militant business. It's not passive. No, it's militancy. The trade unionism was born on. Then I came up in the 60s, 70s with Black Power, ALM, Alliance, and all these things. It's militancy. You want something, you get in numbers, and you take it. As we used to go to meetings. Initially, you go to a meeting, we meet 5, 6 people. The next time we go, maybe 10. But we went to every little cranny, cleft, and nook in Dominica. If it's a bicycle we had, we got a speaker, we put it on it. And that's how I know you are able. But people have become so fearful that they don't even want to be seen. People don't want to be seen talking to each other. This is the kind of fear that has been instilled in people, that they don't even want to be seen talking to each other. And this is the dangerous part of it. And people must get out of that fear. How do we get them out of that fear is the critical, crucial question. And it is because, one, they don't understand, they don't know civics, as people said. They don't understand it. They don't know the purpose. They are just there. Their child is sick. They want to get a paracetamol. They go to a PAL rep or the person that say they control. Their grandmother is sick. They're gone to the person, that individual. Okay, the one-man government. And so people have become so that they have lost themselves. They have lost pride in their own selves. And so this is what the man has destroyed family. I mean, I thought the slave masters did a good job on breaking up the Negro family. That was the first thing they did, break up the Negro family, because they recognized the unity and strength in family. Because somebody said it took a village to grow a child. It's not a saying, that is what happened. Negro people, that's what happened. Village grew a child. You didn't have this thing, but obviously we had somebody who has no respect for people's dignity, people's rights, the Constitution, the laws of your country or institutions, nothing. Total disrespect for all of it. We sit by and we take it gladly because we get a sheet of plywood, 2 posts, 4 nails this election. Next election, we get another set. And then some of us, we live in Canada, but we have a house that was built supposedly for displaced persons in Petit Savan and other displaced persons at Hurricane. But they have a house. I didn't say so. The minister said so themselves, that they beg for it, they plead for it, they come on their knees, and when we give it to them now, they're renting it. But this is the state that the country has become. And we have to, I think, I may say that our generation, may have failed the younger people in that we have not educated them properly in terms of what is their civic duty and their responsibility as adults now that are grown up. When you're 18, you're not a child anymore. You're an adult, you're on your way. There are people who are maybe 36, almost 40 years, they never had a job. Never had a job. So we need, first of all, to capture these things, but it will take some time. And as we said, it's unity that is going to get the issue. So whatever function they have on the 31st, everybody, man, woman, child, whoever, come out. Please come out and support it. We need to fix our country. The banks are gone. We don't have an economy. Some farmers are trying, but they don't have markets for their produce. We don't have markets. We don't have transportation to get it there. We have lost the farmers. The economy is gone.
Right.
What we depend on? selling passport, only a few people. Only a few people. And then we have the merchants who buy cheap and sell. They make no contribution whatsoever other than widening our trade deficit, increasing the loss of our foreign exchange. We don't have an economy. Agriculture is not there. No businesses, what to speak of. DCP went. Now, why would DCP go? Why would Koguli go? Why would all these other industries go? Two things.
We have to wrap.
Okay, we'll wrap up. Failure, I don't blame the government too much. I blame the financial institutions' failure to go to these people and say, how can I help you? And the excuses that they put on these boards are disgrace to Dominica and their children. We need to do better than that, Dominica. We need to do better than that. Good night. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. G.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dominicans, for lending your ears.
No, I certainly think we need to do a lot better than that. But we have to also recall, Gable, as you give your final words here tonight, we have to also recall that we're not living in isolation on the planet, you know. We're just a little speck on the whole globe. If you look at it, if you look at the whole map, it's difficult to find Dominica. You know, it's very small and very tiny. The fact of the matter is we have islands all around us. They all have financial institutions. Why is it that some of these economies are doing much better than ours? They have similar financial institutions to us. I think the reason is because, Gable, the people in those islands understand their civic rights, their constitutional rights, their legal rights, and their civic responsibilities. And they decided we're going to go out to fight for our rights. Like, to me, this is the only logical difference I can see. I mean, why is it that Antigua can change its government and Grenada can change its government and St. Lucia can change its government, St. Kitts changes its government? Why can't we? They have free and fair elections. They're changing their governments. Give me your final word.
First of all, I just want to thank you and Brother Lambie at Master Control and Brother Louis for allowing our people to seize some sense of solidarity. But I want to focus on the education mission, because at the end of the day, we are not doing better than the oligarchy if we do not educate. And what's an oligarchy? Listen to me, my fellow Dominicans. An oligarchy is a small group of people having control of a country, organization, or institution. That's what we have in Dominica. A small group of passport sellers, their friends and family, having control of an entire country with zero accountability to the people they govern. And in that oligarchy, some eat all while the others go without. The only way we can meaningfully engage is to move away from that oligarchy and return to the value system of a democracy, away from a one-party state led by one man, his family and friends, and his foreign handlers, to a mass movement where we have solidarity. My friends, what is solidarity? I've asked Brother G to use the song by Peter Seeger as a theme song to make that call between now and the end of the month for a mass movement where we do what solidarity basically says it represents. Solidarity means as follows, and I quote, unity or agreement of feeling or action, especially among individuals, with a common interest, mutual support within a group. So listen to the themes here. Unity or agreement of feeling or action, especially among individuals, with a common interest, mutual support within a group. Well, that's what we will need. Social transformation has always proceeded from the French Revolution to the American Revolution to the Civil Rights Movement to the independence movement of which we were part, where there is agreement, where there is common interest among individuals, and they coalesce based on that common interest in a group. That's why if you have each finger on a hand, each trying to go in their own different direction, that hand will never be able to come together and make a fist. When we raise that fist of solidarity and we say power to the people, power to the Dominican people, the very foundations of the oligarchy will tremble, because we are more than them and our cause is just, and that we know we shall win. And so let us dedicate ourselves. Let's educate. Let's unite. Let's be imbued with that spirit of solidarity. Each Dominican showing kindness, understanding, and illuminating the minds of each other, sharing information, using social media as an educational tool, not to simply pass jokes or to show what kind of car you have or the big house you have, if you have one at all, but to use your smartphone in a smart way to secure your liberation. That, my friends, is the mission of the moment. We can get together. To be civic-minded means getting together in organization, have mutual interest, and dedicate ourselves to the recovery of our democracy. That is the mission, and I want to thank Q95 Radio for allowing itself to be utilized as an instrumentality of that liberation movement. Thank you very much, and may God bless the solidarity movement we will need to get to victory sooner than later.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gibbs. Thank you so much, Louis and Lambi and Sherwin and all of the folks who've been with us on Facebook and on YouTube and on the radio, everywhere in Dominica and outside, regionally, globally. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us tonight. I really think that we've arrived at a conclusion which I hope everyone else in Dominica can see, every Dominican at home and abroad, friends of Dominica can understand. It is a reasonable thing to want to have a good democracy. It is a reasonable thing, a democracy that works for everybody, not just for a few. It is a reasonable thing to have free and fair elections. What's wrong with that? And I think it is reasonable for civic-minded people who really understand the civic responsibilities to go out there and say, listen, we really want electoral reform. We want free and fair elections. And we're going to gather in large numbers and demand that we get it. And I don't see why any reasonable thinking regime in office would have a problem with that, because it levels a playing field. And I cannot understand why any reasonable electoral commission can say no to that. And I hope that we can have members of the Electoral Commission here on this program for us to discuss that specific thing with them very soon. First, to get their opinion, what they think about really getting free and fair elections in which campaign finance reform is one of the essential ingredients, one of the imperatives. So I certainly hope we can take that discussion now to the question of really trying to get electoral reform within the not too distant future. If we can accomplish that, we'll have done a good thing for our democracy, for our society, and for our people. So Gabe and Louis and Lambi and Shu and everybody, thanks a lot. And let me say good night to everybody. See you some other time. Take care.
Good night, and God bless you.
Bye for now.
Good night. Thank you.
Solidarity forever.